Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark.
Dark House Stories, Volume 2, Story Number 1. I've heard my share of stories about skinwalkers and things that could maybe be related over the years, mostly secondhand, and some first-hand accounts. And aunt, a family friend, I heard this story from her. She lived out in Arizona, and one day around dusk she was driving her truck down a stretch of road when something ran up from the side and started pacing her vehicle. At first she thought it was some sort of big dog. Then she looked and realized it was a nude man wearing some sort of mask, running on all fours, with a wolfskin tied around his neck. She said she sped up to over 70 miles per hour, and the guy, or wolf, kept up with her car. She drove to the friend's house that had been her destination, pulled in the driveway, and laid on the horn, too afraid to get out of the vehicle, but he was gone. I'd heard a similar story from a fellow who was out in New Mexico about what he figured was either a skinwalker or something like it. He'd been out hiking as part of a party. These people, they would get together every so often and go out into the wilderness. One night, during this little expedition, as people were getting ready to turn in, he walked away from the campfire to some trees a distance away to avoid his bladder. The trees were like 50 or so feet from where he and his friends had camped. He was doing his business and suddenly felt incredibly nervous as he did so, when he heard what sounded like a lone coyote yipping and howling not too far off. Then he heard it again. It was closer. So he finished pissing and zipped up, ready to head back to camp, when he heard the yip howl once more, and he looked around and saw the source of the noise. According to him, crouched on the top of a nearby tree trunk, where the branches start to branch out, was a man, completely naked and his whole body covered with markings, like tattoos or body paint maybe. On top of his head was some sort of animal skull. He wasn't sure what kind, just that this man in the tree was wearing an animal skull like a helmet. Now, the man tilted his head back and let out a string of coyote yips and howls, which was more than enough to send the narrator scrambling back to camp, disturbing his friends with whom he shared his story. Well, let's just say nobody laughed at him, partly because they'd heard the coyote noises, and partly because they'd heard about the stuff like it before. Story number 2. This is a true story. I did my student teaching at a Navajo BIA school in Aneth, Utah in the early 80s. I lived on the reservation for a semester and made some real connections with some of the Navajo while I was there. They told me a little about skinwalkers, absolutely rock solid in their belief in their existence. Some things I thought were interesting were that they said the reason the Navajo had so many dogs was that dogs could tell the skinwalkers. They thought people could not discern them, and that they would bark like crazy if the skinwalkers came around. They also told me that the reason many of the Navajo turned to Christianity, at the time there were lots of Christian and Mormon missionaries coming onto the reservation, was to help protect themselves from skinwalkers. One time on a trip to Canyon de Chelly, an uninspiring place to visit by the way, my Navajo friend and I were eating in a nearby town. My friend became quiet and then very serious. She said, "See that lady over there looking at us? She's a skinwalker." Naively curious, I looked around to see a very unattractive middle-aged woman with dark, unsettling glare looking back at me. I asked my friend how she knew she was a skinwalker, and she basically said that it was common knowledge in certain circles. My friend was in no mood to linger, so we quickly finished and left the restaurant. Upon returning to the school, I stayed in an apartment in the girls' dormitory. I became sick, horribly sick. I mean, hideously sick, for 3 days. The second day, my friend came to visit. She looked me over as if to make sure I wasn't going to die or something like that and said, "I told you she was a skinwalker," and soon left. I was shocked, not having put the two together. To this day I wonder. I must say I loved my 4 months there. It was life-changing, really. An awesome experience overall, except for that one instance. Next story. Y'all need to chill about the skinwalkers. I mean, the second you see someone talk about their experiences in a forest, y'all run around screaming, "Skinwalker!" like it's the end of the whole world. And they're definitely going to die. And you do that regardless of where they are geographically, what time of year it is, or even the type of events they're experiencing. Honestly, it's enough to make me want to bang my head against the wall sometimes. First of all, they aren't even skinwalkers. Skinwalkers probably don't even exist anymore, since the Navajo culture has dwindled significantly, and to my knowledge, there have been no Navajo shamans who have rejected their faith in recent years. It's possible there's one or two still around, but they're going to be low in number, and in northeast Arizona and parts of New Mexico, they're desert dwellers and aren't even found in forest. The creatures that you're calling skinwalkers have never been given a proper name. I've called them voice takers since I first encountered one when I was 12 or so. Back then I lived with my parents in the forest of Northern California, way off the beaten track. I mean, it was like an hour drive to the nearest town. It was that isolated. Our family had lived there for almost 40 years, so the creatures in the forest more or less left us alone, until I got old enough to wander into the woods by myself. They were always curious about me, and more than once I had one knocking on my window in the early hours of the morning. But I don't count those encounters because I was never in any real danger. The first time one properly got to me, I was 12 years old and out in the forest alone for the first time. It was my first year going to school instead of being homeschooled by my mother, and I, like most 12-year-olds, hated school. So I went into the forest to blow off some steam. It was getting dark already and was approaching sunset, which is important because voice takers, like most of the creatures in the forest, are nocturnal. I was walking along one of the trails, not paying attention to where I was going, when I heard someone call my name. They sounded just like my mother. So I called back, "Mom?" And of course, it called me again. Let me just say this voice taker was smart. In fact, it was the smartest voice taker that I'd ever come across. Most of the time, they aren't much more intelligent than your average dog, which is why they usually imitate animals. That's just as effective as using a human voice. You would not believe the number of campers who will follow the sound of a dog barking in the forest for miles. Anyway, it was calling me from the direction of my house. So of course, I turn around and start heading back towards the house and towards the voice taker. It's still calling me, and I'm yelling back every couple of minutes. And then it says, "Alicia, I can hear you. Come over here." It sounded like my mother was terrified. I never saw my mother afraid before or after this incident, but I knew she was then. This voice taker does fear and anxiety really well, by the way. Before I moved away from that house, I could pick it out of a crowd because it always sounded hurt. So I started panicking a little, not knowing why she was upset. I could tell my mom was off the path, so I stepped off of it and kept following the sound of her voice, all the while telling her I was coming and just to wait for me. I get to where her voice is coming from, and it's coming from right behind this big tree. I walked around it, and the voice taker was there. One of the things you guys always get right is that the voice takers don't want to be seen. They prefer to stay hidden until the very last second, and there's a damn good reason for that. They are ugly and awkward, and won't pass for anything besides a voice taker when you lay eyes on it. This one was standing upright with its back against the tree, with its huge circular mouth hanging over, humpbacked with its shoulders at an awkward angle. One of its legs had been broken at some point, and it was standing awkwardly. It was scary as hell to hear my mother's voice echoing out of that gaping circular hole it called the mouth. "There you are, Alicia," it said. I tried to run away, obviously, but it grabbed me. It wasn't much larger than I was, and it was skeletal and weak-looking, but being grabbed by it felt like I was being held by an adult 3 times my size. It threw me to the ground and climbed on top of me. That mouth expanded vertically, and then the rest of its body did too. Like it had a zipper from the top of its head all the way down to the belly button. Flesh peeled backwards and opened up, exposing the inside of its body. The bones went too, the ribs and skull flexing like they were made of rubber. It was hollow inside, except for these pale sacks of flesh that hung pulsating from the inside of its rib cage and what looked like tonsils in its throat. I was trying to scream, but by then the weight of its body had pressed all the air out of my lungs. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest, and I couldn't move my arms or legs. Those pale organs inside of its rib cage started to grow and reach towards my face, and my adrenaline spiked so hard I felt my consciousness try to leave my body. It gave me a needed boost of clarity and awareness of my body. I managed to get my legs up under the voice taker and started kicking the inside of its torso, contorting my body to keep my face as far away from its organs as possible. After a couple of seconds of that, it shifted to hold down my legs, and I got my arm loose. To this day, I don't know why I thought it was a good idea, but I reached out and punched it in the tonsil. It screamed so loud, and in so many different voices all at once, that my senses almost couldn't handle it. It was like being blasted full volume with every action movie fight and scene all at once. My ears started ringing and I actually thought I had died for a moment. Then I realized I was still alive and I punched again, hitting the other voice sac this time. The same thing happened again, and the voice taker was finally stunned enough to loosen its hold on me a little bit. I kicked it off of me, got to my feet. I seized the nearest large stick and hit the thing in the head twice. Then its zipper started to close up again. Instead of leaving well enough alone, I grabbed whatever I could from the ground and stuffed it inside. Rocks, leaves, beetles, flowers, pine needles. It all went into the voice taker. I wasn't able to get much in there, but what I did manage was enough to make it retch and spill open again. Its body literally turned inside out. While it was lying there writhing and flopping like a demonic manta ray, I stood up, still holding the stick I had used to beat it. Which is when I noticed there were 3 more watching me from the tree line. At this point, it was almost fully dark, but I could make them out because my entire body was aware of their shape now. Like how you instantly recognize a snake when you see one. I was dead terrified, but I was angry too at that point, and I knew they wouldn't just leave me. So I screamed as loudly as I could, "What do you want? I'll beat you all too." But then none of them approached me, and after a few seconds, I backed away from all 4 of them. When none followed, I took my new stick and ran all the way back to the house. I was bleeding from the ears and temporarily deaf for about 10 minutes afterward, and sometimes I still hear ringing in my ears because of it. The voice takers never tried to lure me away ever again. I would tell you that I don't know why they all didn't pile onto me that night and kill me, but that would be a lie. I won't tell you why right now, though. If people ask, I might explain later, but for now, let's just say that there's a whole lot more than voice takers in most forests, and they're like coyotes or foxes in terms of the food chain, mostly feeding off scraps and remains other creatures leave behind. I learned later that their diet mostly consists of leaves and grass, that they only go after humans and other large animals during their breeding season, which begins in late summer and extends into mid-fall. The other thing that I learned later is by punching that voice taker in the tonsil, they collect sounds in the sacs in their throat. I don't know how, but they literally capture voices and release them back out. The voice taker that attacked me must have been hanging around the house for months or years, catching fragments of my mother's voice in order to catch me off guard. When I punched those sacs, I released all of the sounds that the voice taker had stored up. It was the equivalent of punching someone's breath out of them, but like I'd actually managed to collapse its lung. Now, obviously, I don't recommend dealing with voice takers this way, since you'll probably just be eaten by others even if you incapacitate one in this way. Instead, if you think you're being attacked by voice takers, set up speakers facing outwards from your house or campsite and play something with a whole bunch of voices in it. Sitcoms and comedy shows with an ensemble cast are best, especially if they have a laugh track. The voice taker will be so preoccupied with collecting new voices and sounds that it will probably stop trying to attack you for that night. And then instead of hearing the voices of your friends or animals calling you from the woods, you get to hear snippets of dialogue from the office for a week or so. It's good fun, and a lot less difficult to explain away. Plus, you'll give the other creatures in the woods a laugh with it, which is always a good first impression. If voice takers are your biggest problem, you've gotten off easy. I should mention that some of the other creatures that stories here have lumped in under the title Skinwalker are different from the voice takers, and a whole lot more difficult to deal with. But I don't want to make this any longer than it already is. And I'm not convinced you'll take my advice, even if I give it. Next story. It's late summer 1986, and we were driving through the Rocky Mountains on our way to Ore. There were three of us, Steve, Danny, and me. We were young, dumb, and fed up with what life was really like after college. So we bought some matches, packed a cooler of beer, food, and beer, and loaded up my trusty Toyota with all the fixings for a classic camping trip. This trip was supposed to shake up the devastating monotony of our daily lives. And shake it up it did, to the very core. Right before we were getting ready to set out, Steve's mom ran out of the house and told him he should take their newly adopted family dog Luna for safety. Steve was hesitant. He didn't want to have to look after the dog, especially if we were going to be drinking. And she was a big dog, a mixed husky and something else. Great Dane, maybe? But his mom insisted until finally he broke and agreed to take her. Luna looked up at him with her warm blue eyes and seemed to smile. Steve sighed and said, "I guess I'll sit in the back with her." No, I said, walking over and patting her head. "Let her sit up front with me." She wagged her tail. Most of the car ride went smoothly, and we sang along to the radio, mooed at cows, and waved at our flipped-off motorcyclist. But as we neared our destination and the sun sank behind us, leaving us in a thick, almost tangible darkness, we started to become jumpy, pointing at strange shadows and swift movements. Luna, though, was curled up asleep beside me, unaware of our growing fear. The sky was covered in big, roiling clouds that blew swiftly towards the east, covering and revealing the full moon at random intervals. By now we were the only vehicle on the road. My headlights barely sliced the darkness around us as we weaved our way through the mountains. The isolation, the darkness, the silence, it was all so crushing. "Steve, I thought you said we would be there before the sunset. I told you we shouldn't have stopped at that bar." "Aw, Danny, I didn't know we'd be there for that long." "You wouldn't stop your stupid pool game." "And I won. Come on. It's not that dark out. Would some money make you happy? Hey, cool it. Look, what the hell is that?" I slowed the car down to a stop, trying to see what was blocking the road, but the light from the cloud-covered moon was too dim. "What the hell?" "Danny," I whispered, as she rolled down her window. I was apprehensive, worried this was someone's attempt to rob us, or worse. I had heard all the urban legends before. "I just want to see better." She stuck her head out of the window, and I rolled a little bit closer. Luna, feeling the change in the car's movement, lifted her head and sat up panting. Oh shit, I think it's a dead deer, you guys. Gross." Danny retreated back inside the car and rolled the window back up. "Who the hell just leaves something like that on the road?" "Asshole," Steve said, then leaned forward. "Hey man, think you can drive around it?" Yeah, I think I can." I approached the thing, now seeing the antlers and the gleaming black eyes, open, staring, dead. It blinked. I yelped and jerked the steering wheel, side-swiping the mountainside. "Shit! What the hell, man? It's alive!" "What?" That deer, it's alive!" As I spoke, the deer lifted its head and bleated. The sound echoed around the chasm. We all jumped and watched as it pushed itself up until it was standing on its hind legs, like a man, but uncanny, grotesque. Mesmerized, we sat unable to move as the thing walked over to us, slowly, decidedly, as if walking on two legs was a thing this deer did often. It leaned down next to Danny's window, its face so close to the glass, the steam from its nose fogged it up. A low noise rang out through the car. Luna was growling, her hackles raised, crouched in the seat next to me. Bang! The thing rammed its head into the window. Chaos erupted. Danny screamed, piercing high. Luna started barking, booming, persistent. Steve yelled, telling me to just go, go. I sat there shaking, struggled with a clutch, stalling. Bang! The window cracked, and the thing started making an incredible sound. It sounded like a weird screeching, guttural form of laughter. Finally, the clutch caught, and I sped the hell out of there. I checked the rear view and saw the thing standing on two legs, looking after us. Suddenly, it leapt forward and began running after us. It ran on two legs instead of four, and it was fast, so fast. I drove as fast as I could on that winding mountain road, but despite my speed, the thing still caught up with us. It tapped its antlers at my window and screeched that weird laughter again. Then it pointed in front of us, bared its teeth, and stopped. The abruptness, how quickly it disappeared, caught me off guard. Watch out! I snapped forward, and what I saw made me slam on my brakes. A house. A house in the middle of the road. I guess it was more of a cottage or a hut, but there it was. Clear, vivid in front of us. Danny was audibly crying in the backseat, repeating, "What is that?" over and over to herself. Steve was breathing heavily, like he had just run a marathon. Luna was whimpering beside me and scratching at the window. Nausea enveloped me, made worse by the vibration from my pounding heart. Seriously, what is going on? I think I'm going to puke, man. Don't open that door. Just back up, turn around, man. Let's go back. Towards that thing? No way. Well, if you didn't notice, there's a goddamn house in front of me. Just drive through it, come on. Oh, no. Danny, calm down. It's okay, we're okay. We'll be okay. Danny started sobbing again. Shut up! Danny, please! Guys, look, oh God. The house that was spinning slowly and stopped when the front of it pointed directly at my car. The door to the house slammed open, emitting a sound like a gunshot. A single point of light emerged from the darkness inside the house. A candle, and holding it up was a figure stooped over, covered in what looked like a blackened rag. Began to approach us, lurching forward, swift, then slow, then swift again. It was made this eerie, deep staccato sound. Are you for real right now? Steve was leaning forward, peering out the windshield. Let's go! Reverse! That thing is behind us! Run it over! Look! Danny screamed. The stooped figure was now running at full speed straight at us. It slammed into my hood, and we could finally see that it was an old woman, covered in wrinkles, completely bald, with sharpened yellow teeth. She was moaning and moaning. She crawled up the hood, opened her mouth, and licked the glass, leaving a trail of blood-colored saliva. Luna went wild, barking, foaming at the mouth, throwing herself at the door. Please, back up now! I slammed my foot on the gas, but my tires made a sickening sound. The smell of burnt rubber slipped into the car. It's behind us! I turned back to see the deer's head, teeth still bared, peering at me from the back window. What do we do? What do I do? Luna, no! With a final lunge, Luna forced the door open. It sounded shocking, but she was such a large dog, and strong. A powerful wind picked up and roiled the clouds, dissipating, allowing the light from the full moon to illuminate the scene in front and behind us. Luna was still as a statue, slightly crouched, poised to leap. The hackles on her back quivered, and a single thread of drool spun itself down from her mouth. She began to shake faster and faster. It looked like she was having a seizure. The old woman and the deer thing were both looking over at her. Something strange was happening to Luna. It looked as if her limbs were breaking, elongating. Her snout narrowed, sinking closer to her face. She rose up onto her hind legs, humanoid, and held up towards the sky before locking eyes with a hag on my car. In the blink of an eye, Luna was on the woman, ripping her away, shaking her to and fro in her jaw like a rag doll. Luna flung the woman towards the house and she struck it with some force and didn't get back up. The house and the woman vanished in a puff of smoke. Luna turned towards the thing behind us. It screeched, raising itself up to its full height, challenging her. Luna howled again, then licked her fangs. The thing took 2 steps towards her before turning tail and fleeing down the road, Luna giving chase. They both ran on 2 legs instead of 4. We sat in total silence for a few moments until I leaned over and slammed the passenger door closed. I think Danny passed out. I turned to look at Steve. He looked at me. Let's get out of here, man. We got 2 miles before the thunk, thunk, thunk beneath us couldn't be ignored any longer. A flat tire. Pulled over, and we eyed the darkness around us, paranoid. I'm not changing it. I'm not going out there, Steve said loudly. Don't worry. There's no spare. What? I took it out to make room for all the camping stuff. Are you kidding me? No. Well, what the hell do we do now? I sighed. I didn't know. Suddenly, like magic, like a miracle, headlights appeared behind us. A godsend, a car. I hope they're normal. Me too. Should we tell them? We locked eyes again. No. If they bring it up, maybe. If it's a cop, definitely not. He'll think we're high. The car rolled up beside us. It was totally black with tinted windows. The windows rolled down and behind us sat a middle-aged man. He looked tired, maybe sad. Need some help? Oh, thank God, Steve whispered. Yes, flat tire, don't have a spare. Well, that's dumb, the man said. You should always carry a spare, always. Never know what could happen. Lucky for you, I think I have one that will fit your car. You joking? The man shook his head and hopped out of his car. He was dressed sharply, black suit, black tie, black shoes, all covered by a trench coat. Come on, you can hold a flashlight for me. I hesitated, then exited the car. What happened here? He pointed to the window next to Danny's head. It's been like that for a while. Some neighbor kid hit it with a baseball. Uh-huh. The man nodded. And here? Tired, just tired. We've been driving for a while. Driving where? Ouray for camping. Nice place. We've heard. Say, the man said, releasing the jack. Job done. Seen anything weird tonight? My heart sped up, and I looked around us, half expecting the deer or the woman or Luna to come sprinting towards us. What do you mean weird? Oh, I don't know, anything out of the ordinary? No, why? No reason, just heard some spooky tales. Tales? That the natives who used to live around here would tell. What tales? The man stood up and dusted his hands off on his coat. Well, he said, ignoring my question, you're all set. You're about 20 minutes out from Ouray, and 2 hours from the sunrise. I'd advise you get a move on. Never know what might be stalking you out there. I'm headed the same way, actually. I can drive behind you if you like. A muffled yes came from inside the car, and we both looked up to see Steve nodding voraciously. Yeah, that would be great, actually. The corners of the man's mouth twitched a bit as he nodded, sliding back into his car. We drove to Ouray without incident, and as soon as we hit the city, the man in the car behind us flashed his brights twice, then flipped a U-turn, speeding down the way we came. I thought he said he was going this way, I said, looking in my rear view. Who cares? Let's get a hotel room and leave first thing tomorrow morning, Danny said. She had woken up as we were driving towards Ouray. We filled her in on the strange man and how he helped us, but she was still spooked and jumpy. And we did just that. We didn't dare camp in the wilderness or even leave the relative safety of the town. On the way back to civilization, we swore to never tell anyone what happened. It was too weird, uncanny, horrifying. Steve was silent, afraid of what his mom might do about Luna. We made up some story about how she had fallen over a cliff after chasing a deer. Poor Luna. We did stop for an hour around the area it happened and called out to her, but to no avail. We never saw her again. It's been years since this happened, and I'm old now. The three of us lost touch after we returned from the trip, but vowed to keep this secret to our death. Last I heard, Steve died from a heart attack and Danny was diagnosed with stomach cancer. I figured it's about time I shared my tale. Maybe it'll help me make some semblance of sense out of it. And in the end, though, I don't know if those things were protecting us from her or if she was protecting us from them. I guess I'll never know. Sometimes late at night, when I hear howling, I like to imagine it's Luna out there somewhere, running free in the wild.